Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Boardman Black and Gold podcast. We are here with a Browns fan. It's definitely a little bit of tension at times, but I think we're going to do our best to keep things objective in this episode, for this outside perspective episode. Joey, how about you go and introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm Joey Keller, and I was originally raised in Northeast Ohio, south side of Cleveland. So naturally, yes, I am in fact a Browns fan. For the most part, that is an unfortunate badge that I have to wear on my sleeve. But, there's been a couple times in my life over the last few years that has been fun. But once again, we are back to the eternal pit of misery at the Factory of Sadness up there on the shores of Lake Erie. Not been a fun year, to say the least. I was, from day one, honestly from day negative 10, when the Browns were first introduced as a suitor for Deshaun Watson, I was against it. I've been against it, and basically it worked out exactly as I had predicted. I think I remember talking with you about it throughout really the entire process, and you can attest that, I got this one right, unfortunately. Not all of my takes are correct or predictions hit, but this one kind of right on the head, unfortunately, so here we are.
Well, I know this about you. I mean, you're a ball knower, and the fact that you kind of saw this coming, you had this sense of dread for a good bit. And is that is that where this season went wrong? Is it just simply the fact that they started with him for so long and kept with him for so long? Is that what amounted to where we're at this season?
There's a lot of problems, I think, that are going on with this team, but I think that that's probably the biggest one. The O-line's been very banged up, has not been playing very well. The defense has been a little hit or miss compared to what we saw last year. The wide receiver production was pretty much awful. However, I will say, ever since Jameis has taken over, guys like Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy, and even Cedric Tillman look way better than they were before. But it's hard to, watch a game that Deshaun Watson played in and confidently say, he looked like a starting caliber quarterback. Outside of maybe a couple guys like Daniel Jones or maybe Will Levis or a couple of these Aaron Rodgers games, Deshaun Watson flat out looked like possibly one of, if not the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. He held on to the ball for way too long in the pocket, even when he was given time. His throws were inaccurate and poorly timed. He just seemed like he didn't want to be there. He had an attitude on the field, on the sidelines. That makes me think it probably stemmed in the locker room as well. And when you are a quarterback, whether you like it or not, you have to be a leader. That's just the way it goes. You've seen it in Pittsburgh for years. You guys get a new quarterback and new coach every 15, 20 years.
Right.
Obviously, you got a new one with Kenny and it didn't work out, but you quickly made a fix. And, between Russ and Justin, both of them have been very good leaders, very selfless, and I think that that's been a big reason for the surprising success of the Steelers' offense. So, while it may not be the biggest problem, it has been a problem and a very big one, and one that I think needs to end.
Yeah.
We're going to have to pay the guy whether we want to or not the next 2 years or so. Why not do what Denver did and just, cut ties, nip it in the bud or whatever, stop the bleeding, just pay him the money and send him off on his way.
Yeah, it seems like that has to be on the table at this point. And Jameis Winston, he's a 30-30 guy, the infamous 30-30 season. I've been thinking it a long time, and even this season, he gives you a better shot to win any given game than Deshaun Watson did. He can go for 4 touchdowns and 400 yards. He had almost 400 yards this last week against the Saints, but he could also have that 3-interception, 120-some yard game. But I think you take that coin flip if you're the Browns, and, that's kind of honestly some of the Steelers fans, myself and my partner included, were a little bit concerned about this game because of kind of the volatility of Jameis Winston. Do you think that that concern as a Steelers fan is warranted this week? What do you think about that?
I mean, I think just having concern in general is warranted, and I'm not trying to really talk trash into the rivalry per se, but, you know, the AFC North, you can say what you want about whether it's the best division in football, it's the toughest. Mm-hmm. Because every single game that's played between two teams in this division is a rivalry. It can get ugly. It can get heated. These games just, you can tell that they mean more. You know, how many times over the years have we seen, you know, one of these teams when they're a big underdog, you know, they're down and out against a top playoff contender and, you know, they pull off a big upset. You know, they're always close. Look at Pittsburgh and Baltimore this past weekend. Very close, very physical, scrappy, ugly type game. You know, Cincy, Baltimore a couple weeks ago, Thursday Night Football. Held the Browns versus Baltimore in Jameis's first start. No one expected Cleveland to win that game, and they did. So that's just kind of the way that games go in this division. And yeah, like you said with Jameis, and this is part of why I was calling for him to start from basically the day we signed him. Yes, you don't really know what you're going to get. But at the same time, that's kind of how Joe Flacco was for us last year. Mm-hmm. People forget, yeah, he went out and threw for 2-3 touchdowns and 300 yards almost every single game. But he also usually had 2 or 3 picks every game as well. So it's just kind of, you just kind of got to roll the dice because the running game just isn't there, you know, with the O-line being banged up. Nick Chubb is still working his way back. You know, he is back on the field, but, you know, he's not what he used to be, and time will tell maybe next year if he will get back to that level. Jerome Ford is just not that good. So, you know, you kind of have to just sling the rock and take those chances. You're the underdog, you know, and you got to play like it. It's the type of thing where, you know, you'll pull out a trick play here or there. You'll go for 2 with the game on the line and things like that. Sometimes when you're playing with like that house money mentality, that's the best way to go. And I think that this game on Thursday will be the type of game where, you know, the Browns have nothing to lose. We really don't. I mean, the season's over. We're 2-8. We probably should intentionally lose, get a good draft pick. I will say I hope that we're not tanking for a quarterback. There's not a single quarterback in this draft that I like. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, if we can go and spoil the Steelers' day and get a head start on ruining their weekend, then absolutely, why not do it? You know, What Browns fan wouldn't want that? Right.
And I'm kind of thinking that based on what I saw from their performance last week against the Saints, I wonder if their mindset was, okay, we're going to have a short week against the Steelers. Why don't we just throw everything in our preparation for that Steelers game on Thursday Night Football and kind of just look over this Saints game, which, I mean, you could make an argument that is also a tank bowl, so losing that game doesn't mean a whole lot. But, hey, if you have a chance to beat up on a Steelers team that is exceeding expectations, like you said, you take advantage of that, especially on a national stage, I feel like.
Yeah, and I just feel like it seems like we played the Steelers on Thursday Night Football like every year, and for whatever reason, I feel like we've always had success.
Yeah.
I feel like every time we play the Steelers in a primetime game, with the exception of Monday Night Football last year when Chubb went down, it's, you know, there was the game, obviously the infamous one back in 19 with the Mason Rudolph incident, mm-hmm. and, you know, there was one a couple years ago on Thursday Night Football where the Browns got the win with, I believe, Jacoby Brissett.
Yes.
So it's like I said, these games are always closer than they should be. I don't know what the spread is in this game. I haven't really looked into it, but, you know, it wouldn't shock me if it was like Steelers by a touchdown. I'd be like, yeah, you know, low-key, give me the Browns to cover that.
Right.
It should be a one-score game. It should come down to the wire. We'll see. The dog pound will be rowdy. It doesn't matter what their record is. When the Steelers or the Ravens or even the Bengals come to town, the fans show up for that. I hate to say it, but like, this is the type of game where this is our Super Bowl, you know?
Yeah.
We don't have anything else to play for, so why not go all out for this week? And I think that's what they're going to do. Also, you know, he won't admit it, but I think Stefanski is starting to know he might be coaching for his job. Mm. I'm kind of on the fence about whether he should be or not, but I think that could also play a factor. and Jameis is going to get the boys pumped up.
Right.
That dude could motivate someone to walk across the Sahara Desert if he wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, he's awesome like that. I love it.
Yeah.
I wish that dude was like on every football team I've ever played on.
Right. I love him too. I mean, it's hard to like a Cleveland Brown, but of all of them, I mean, you just can't dislike him. He's just such a good guy, and the way that, like you said, he elicits different emotions from the guys around him that, no matter how bad they are, like you said, he's going to get them fired up for this game, and it's going to give them a shot, whether the league, whether the Steelers, whether anybody thinks so or not. So I think that's a great point. And one thing, so you did bring up Kevin Stefanski, and I asked this question to every guest I bring on here. Objectively, try to take your bias out of it. What do you think of Mike Tomlin as a coach?
I have a lot of respect for him. I really do. And people say this and that. I've heard some Steelers fans say they don't like him. Some say they do. Which is weird to me. And coming from a Browns standpoint, where we've had a revolving door of quarterbacks, coaches, GMs, basically everything, he is a model of consistency. Mm-hmm. The dude wins. He's never had a losing season. I get that people are like, oh, he's hanging on to that, consistent winning season thing, but, they barely sneak in the playoffs and, then they lose first round. The last few years, let's be real, though, the Steelers had no business making the playoffs a couple of times they did and having a winning record. With Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, and I feel like there's one or two other guys you start over the past couple years, and yet they find a way. Mm-hmm. And I think that reflects on Tomlin. Now, I think that can be a bit of a nutcase sometimes, and I think there's some skeletons in the closet from the past as well that aren't great, with the whole kind of, they had there's rumors of the old Bounty Gate type stuff with James Harrison and whatnot and all that, but I think that's the way that the NFL just was in that era.
Sure.
And, plenty of other teams did stuff like that. So also you can't really dwell on stuff from 20 years ago or whatever, but the dude's been there forever. He's a Super Bowl winning coach. He makes the playoffs more often than not. He always has a winning season. Not a lot of people expected Pittsburgh to be that good this year.
Right.
They said they'll probably be around a 500 team, and here they are fighting for one of the top seeds in the AFC and the AFC North title. So I tip my cap to him. I'd love to have a coach that's that consistent, and it's hard for me to say a lot of bad, even though, it's like any hatred I have toward him is more out of envy than anything. Yeah,
interesting. That's well said, and that's kind of the perspective that we're looking for in these types of episodes, because there are some people that, they think poorly of Mike Tomlin in times, but you look at 8-2 Steelers in the year 2024, you really can't be too nitpicky. You can't really hate on him this year, because I think he's done a heck of a job. One more thing before we wrap things up. So this game, you said it's probably going to be a close one. Give me a score prediction. Who wins the game? Maybe kind of give me the flavor of how this game turns out.
Well, I think that this is going to be a battle of field goals. I really do. I think that, the Steelers, we've seen it, 2 or 3 times this year where the only points they've scored the entire game came from Chris Boswell, as recently as last week.
Yeah.
I could see that again. Now, the Browns have had trouble. Dustin Hopkins, after he, almost single-handedly took us to the playoffs last year, has been really bad this year because, of course, that's just the way things go for the Browns. A few weeks ago, when Jameis took over, our first game was against the Ravens. I don't know why. I had a gut feeling. I said, I just feel like the Browns are going to pull it off today, and they did. And I'm kind of getting that same gut feeling for this week, and maybe it's delusion. I don't know. Because in Cleveland, it's hard to have hope, but you can have delusion. And I'm thinking that the Browns are going to be able to scrape this one out. And I'm going to say 20-16.
Okay.
Low scoring game. I assume it's going to be cold, probably windy. That stadium can be a wind tunnel, especially at nighttime. So maybe thinking field goals isn't the best guess here, but I don't know. I think it's going to be a defensive clash. I think we're going to see a lot of scrums, some brawls. Probably nothing as crazy as a few years ago, but yeah, I think low scoring, and the Browns are able to grit one out here on the shores of Lake Erie. And also, if I can add one last point about Mike Tomlin, I think he's definitely in the top 3 for Coach of the Year this year. With, like you said, being 8-2 kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think league wide, I think he's starting to kind of get that understanding that he is in that conversation. Maybe Steelers fans aren't thinking of that because we think of the whole statement, the standard is the standard, and Steelers fans have high standards, sometimes I think incapable standards that can't even be met. One loss, even like I'm thinking about this week too, one loss to a Browns team after coming back and beating the Ravens with a historic offense, holding them to 16 points. People are going to blow up if the Steelers lose this game. And, I think that's kind of, my mindset is that's exactly what the Browns want. They want the Steelers to be in disarray. And, I truly see a very similar thing to you. Maybe not the field goal type of game, but kind of a groggy type of slog in a way. And I think it's going to be close. I think it comes down to the end. So
I think it'll be an ugly football game. You've seen all over Twitter and social media how people have criticized a lot of these primetime games, especially Thursday night. And I'm sure there's something that needs to be studied there about, maybe the short week leads to sloppier football. It certainly would make sense. But especially with these two teams, I think that trend will continue into this game.
Yeah, I can see that very much happening. And maybe we get kind of both sides of Jameis Winston in this game. Maybe we might get the 3 interceptions, the 3 picks in this game, and it might just come down to who has the ball at the end. So I think that's a real possibility. And Joey, you broke this down masterfully. You're a ball knower. You're a Cleveland Browns sufferer. You do a good job with that, and I admire that in you. And that's something that comes from the depths of my heart. So I appreciate you coming on with me this week and just kind of giving a perspective from the Browns side. And hey, we might have to have you back on at some point. You killed it this week.
Hey, I appreciate that. And just remember, Cleveland Cavaliers, 15-1. The East runs through Cleveland. We'll see you in the finals against Oklahoma City. You can bookmark that now.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I did go to Game 7 against the Magic when I was in Cleveland this summer. That was a fun time. I did enjoy that.
Oh, yeah. All right. Appreciate you having me on, Z-Man.
Thanks, Joey. I appreciate you. And as always, the Boardman Black and Gold podcast is sponsored by Zeka Enterprises, crafting furniture solutions in northwestern Pennsylvania. We'll be back after Thursday Night Football, myself, Zane, and David, to break things down. And we will see you hopefully after a Here We Go Steelers win. Thanks, guys, for listening, and we will see you next time.